We're going to show you in this movie how to use a feature in the team software in which we do some manual phase determination ourselves. We call this a locked phase list. You may be familiar that there is a feature in the team software called the locked element list. This is a little bit different in that we're dealing with phases. But again, we're going to tell the software, don't bother discovering all of these phases. Here's at least a minimum set of phases we want you to use. And in some instances, this will do a little better job when we have some fairly either complex or in some cases phases that are quite similar to each other. And we have that situation in the phase map we're looking at. There are 4 phases that were shown here, a red, a yellow, a blue, and a green. And as it turns out, there really isn't a huge difference between the green phase and the blue phase. So it's done something fairly subtle. They all have aluminum, silicon, potassium, sodium, and maybe a little bit of calcium in it. And but there is some difference in the ratio of aluminum to silicon and things like that. But the blue phase actually does have 2 definite phases in it. The green, I believe, also has 2 phases within it. And I'm going to try and force it to do a little better job, a more sensitive job in defining those phases. So what we're going to do first is I'm going to show you that I did a series of point analyses, actually area analyses, from the sample. If I double click on area 5, it will bring up the backscatter image. And in the backscatter image, you can see that what was the blue area in that phase map, there is an area that is a little brighter near the edges where the mouse is drawn right now. And over here on the little area to the right here, there is a little brighter region, but it transitions into this slightly darker region. And again, they were all part of the blue phase. In the green phase, and that we were just looking at, there's a little brighter area where the mouse is now, and there's a darker area where the mouse is shown right now. So what we did was we collected 7 spectra here. And so the first one was collected from what's called area 1, shown in red here. Second one is in green, area 2. Then area 3, and then a little darker area, area 4. And then area 5 was again part of the blue phase previously. And the green spectrum, area 6, was also part of the blue phase before. And then area 7 is this area in the lower right, has the same gray level as area 2. And as it turns out, the spectrum really were the same for the 2 of those. So we have 7 spectra that were collected. 6 of them, I believe, are unique. The 7th one, not really. The 7th one was a duplicate of the 2nd one. So what we're going to do at this point is we're going to use the spectra that were collected, and we're going to create our own phases from those spectra. So I double-click on the very first one. So again, I double-click on the first phase, and we're seeing the elements shown here. And I'm about to make a mistake, because I want to make sure that you understand how we actually implement the feature that we're trying to use, because we don't always, while we're playing around with the software, want to use this feature. And so if you click in the environment panel, you'll bring up an area that we sometimes refer to as tier 2, a panel, and you'll see that there's something called phase mapping. If I click on phase mapping, there is an area here called use selected phases, and I actually don't have it checked right now, but I really am going to have to use that. But I'm not going to do it the first time, just to illustrate that nothing happens. There's a button to the left of the spectrum called Create Phase from Spectra. If I click on that, doesn't matter if I click on it, left click, double click on it, right click on it, double right click on it, doesn't matter, control click, nothing is going to happen. And so in order to use this feature, you have to select this. And there's a little note down below that says use selected phases from project tree. And also it's a reminder about a feature that we're not currently using right now about multi-field detectors. Actually, multi-field analysis we do use, and dual detectors, which is something we'll be doing shortly. Okay, so now that I have that selected, now I can actually click on this multicolor button, and then it automatically expands the area called currently selected phases. So it creates a phase name for it. It says that it is gray. It's going to use a gray phase for that. Well, it turns out I originally never want to use the gray phase. I like to use for my brighter phases yellow, because I think somehow it looks prettier that way. Then I'll click on area 2. Different spectrum comes out. This one's more calcium rich. And if I tell it to go ahead and put this one in the list, I can. What I can do as well now is I can do this fairly quickly, where I double click on area 3. As soon as the spectrum appears, I tell it to put that one in my phase list. Now they're both in there as gray, but now I can go ahead and select a new color for them. And I'm going to use turquoise for what is really the second phase. And I'm going to use blue for what is my third phase here. Okay. Now what I'm going to do is the same thing. I'm going to use spectrum for areas 4, 5, and 6, and then I'll assign colors to them. And in the meantime, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pause the recording of the movie just to speed things up here just a little bit. Okay, well, I'm finished assigning my 6 phases. And so I have one that's going to become yellow, another one that'll become turquoise, blue, magenta, green, and orange. Up above this area in the where we're defining the phases, currently selected phases, you'll see that there is that checkbox for use selected phases, which again has to be on before we use this feature. Then below that there's one that says phase library list, and it says locked. So it's a radio button. You either have to be locked or that you can add phases. In the case of locked, it means that we are not going to add any new phases. We're going to use the phase list that we've got. And every pixel, regardless of whether it really is part of one of these 6 phases, is going to be assigned to one of the 6. And whereas if we had add phases checked, that means that we would make the spectrum fit one of the phases that we have here. But if it turns out it didn't fit terribly well, then we would create a new phase for it. Now, I want to use what's called locked phases in this case. And so this is a sample that I've had for years. I think I'm pretty comfortable in saying that I know what's here. Now, that sounds like famous last words, or a little bit arrogant perhaps. But in this case, we're going to go ahead and say that, no, I do know what's here. And so let's go ahead now and we will create a map. So all I have to do is go to my mapping, click on image area to collect an image. Okay, we're done with that. We have an image. Now I'm going to collect map. And we're going to use standard quality map, phased element, and so forth. And so now we go ahead and collect. Okay, so you can see the very first pass. Now we are collecting the map data, and I'm recording the movie. 2 fairly computer resource intensive programs. And so the mapping runs a little bit slower. So after another frame perhaps, I'm going to go ahead and pause the recording of the movie, and then we'll resume in about another 10 or 15 frames. All right, I've resumed it after 15 frames, now starting the 16th. And you'll see now the definition of what was orange versus green. The orange may look a little bit brown in this case, is now pretty good. And yet we're still a little bit speckled in the area that is occupied by the blue phase versus the magenta phase. And so what I'm going to do is I'll pause it again until we're almost done, and then we'll resume the movie. So we've resumed the movie, resumed recording, and we're on collecting field 41. And now the definition between the orange, or almost brownish looking, and green phases is quite good. And we're getting a pretty good definition between the magenta and the blue. And so we are done. It's saving the map right now. I'm going to go ahead and get rid of the project panel. And just to show you that the yellow phase again was our silicon iron rich phase. If I hover over the cyan, it says, or the turquoise, that's silicon and calcium, the 2 dominant elements. And the other 4 phases are almost the same. Silicon, aluminum, oxygen, sodium, potassium. Then here's no potassium. It's silicon, aluminum, oxygen, and sodium. And this one is silicon, aluminum, oxygen, and sodium, exactly the same list, but different proportions between the green and the red. And then the orange, or the gold, I guess it really was, is silicon, aluminum, oxygen, and potassium. And so the difference between those phases is not really too different. They're almost the same. There's just the different proportionality. The elements are the same, but the proportions are slightly different. And so now we forced it to do a little better job of defining the phases. Now, before we finish, let me go ahead and click on Finish. One of the things that you probably ought to do is, if I, again, come to the Environment panel and bring up my Tier 2, if you're about to do another map in the same sample, it might be a good idea for you to continue to use this phase map. However, if you're about to leave for the day and the person who comes in tomorrow is actually doing steels, not aluminosilicates like this, it probably would be a good idea for you to turn off Use Selected Phases, do them a favor. And then also there is a Clear All under, at the bottom where the mouse is right now. So if I just do a left click on that, we clear all these phases. Now, if you wanted to come back tomorrow and, tomorrow afternoon, somebody else has already done something quite different, and you want to do the same thing that you just did, all you would have to do is use Selected Phases, then double click on that map. It will bring back the elements into your phase library. It will bring back everything as you were using it. Now it's changed the sequence here, but the colors are the same. Orange, yellow, green, turquoise, blue. The yellow is the iron-rich phase. The turquoise was the calcium-rich phase. That is true. And so that's a way that we can always get the phase list that was used for a previous map set. Whether it was done as a manual addition of phases, or if you wanted to, you could actually do the same thing on our original phase map. Area 3, double click on it, and here are the phases that it had discovered before. And again, it has to bring back the Tier 2 area so we can see what's in our phase list here. And so here is what it was using. Oh, stage server is not available. Yeah, well, okay. So red, green, blue, and yellow, and that's what was used for that map. And so again, you could start out with an actual phase map that you've done that seems to work quite well. And if it turned out that you decided that you wanted to replace the blue phase with two phases, you could either deselect it or just clear this one. And then you could get two spectra that you want to use to replace it, as we had done before, and just use this one. So that this phase map, phase list would work as well. All right, well, again, since I am done, I'm going to go ahead and clear my list, and I'm going to tell it to not use selected phases. And that concludes our discussion of the locked phase list. Thank you.